The great hall of the Veyari Palace glowed with a strange silver light. Tall spires rose above the chamber like frozen waves, and the walls shimmered with patterns that seemed alive, shifting as if they breathed. Captain Daniel Reeve had been in many alien halls before, but never one that felt so heavy with history. He stood at the center, his boots echoing softly on the smooth crystal floor. Around him, alien nobles watched in silence. Their large, luminous eyes followed his every move, their expressions unreadable to him. He had come to speak about trade, about peace, about diplomacy. What he received was something far more personal and far more shocking. An elder alien woman stepped forward. Her long robes shimmered with threads of gold, and her age was written on her face in faint glowing lines that traced along her skin. She looked fragile, yet her voice carried across the hall with power and sorrow. "Human," she said, her tone trembling. "Please, marry my daughter, the Princess of Veyari." For a moment Daniel thought he had misunderstood. The words struck him like a sudden gust of cold wind. He blinked, searching her eyes for a sign that this was some kind of formal riddle, some diplomatic phrase he had not studied. But the elder's gaze was steady, full of hope and desperation. The hall, already silent, grew heavier. No one whispered, no one moved. Even the shifting patterns on the walls seemed to slow, as though the palace itself waited for his answer. Daniel's heart beat faster. He had expected to negotiate about resources, perhaps to discuss treaties. He had not expected marriage to an alien princess. His mind searched for explanations. Was this politics, a trap, a cultural misunderstanding? He wanted to laugh, to ask if this was some kind of strange joke. But the look in her eyes stopped him. It was not the look of someone playing games. It was the look of someone standing on the edge of despair. The elder woman's voice softened. "You do not yet understand. Our people, we are fading. For thousands of cycles we have ruled the stars, but we are losing strength. Our children are fewer each generation. Our future grows weaker. My daughter carries the hope of our race. If she is joined with you, if your blood mixes with ours, then perhaps we will endure." Daniel felt the weight of her words. He looked around the hall again. Some of the nobles watched with cold disapproval. Others looked away, ashamed, unwilling to meet his gaze. Only the elder stood tall, waiting, her hands trembling slightly as they clutched the edge of her robe. And then he saw her. The princess. She stepped from behind a curtain of silver strands that hung near the throne. She was taller than most humans, her form slender but strong. Her skin glowed faintly like starlight, and her hair shimmered as if it were woven from liquid crystal. Her eyes were the deepest shade of violet he had ever seen, vast and calm like the endless night. She walked forward slowly, her head lifted with pride, but Daniel noticed the tension in her shoulders. This was not her idea. She did not look at him with affection or even with anger. She looked at him the way one might look at a storm on the horizon, something inevitable, something that could not be ignored. Daniel took a breath. His voice came out rough, uncertain. "I came here to speak for my people, not for this. Why me? Out of all the beings in the galaxy, why ask a human?" The elder woman's face softened with something like a smile, but it was a smile full of sorrow. "Because you are human," she said. "Your kind is young, yet already you have crossed the stars. You survive where others would die. You create where others despair. You fight with hope, even when hope is lost. We are old, Captain Reeve, too old. We have forgotten how to change. You are change. You are life. If our blood mixes with yours, maybe we can remember what we lost." Her words echoed in his mind. He had heard many things about humanity, too reckless, too ambitious, too stubborn. But never before had someone called those things life itself. The nobles shifted uneasily. Some whispered now, their voices sharp, their eyes burning with disapproval. The elder ignored them. She only watched him, waiting. The princess finally spoke. Her voice was soft, almost musical, but filled with quiet strength. "I do not know you, human, and you do not know me. Yet my mother believes you can save us. I cannot deny her. But I will not bow to this fate without question. If you choose to step forward, then know this: you will not only marry a princess, you will carry the weight of an entire people." Her eyes locked with his, and for the first time Daniel felt the full force of her presence. She was not just a symbol, not just some alien daughter. She was a person, caught between duty and freedom, and now she was tied to him whether he wanted it or not. Daniel's throat was dry. He had no answer. He stood in the glowing hall of a dying empire, faced with a choice he had never imagined. He was one human, alone among the stars, and yet they asked him to change the fate of a species. Daniel hardly slept that night. The elder woman's plea echoed in his mind, circling like a starship trapped in orbit. Marry her daughter. Save their people. It sounded impossible, yet the way she spoke made it feel like the most serious mission he had ever been offered. He lay on the bed prepared for him in the guest wing of the palace, staring at the ceiling that shimmered faintly like flowing water. He wondered if he had made a mistake coming here at all. The morning light in Veyari was not like Earth's. It was softer, more silver than gold, and it fell into his chamber through long crystal windows. A soft chime rang, and when Daniel opened the door, 2 attendants bowed politely, their large eyes curious. Without a word, they guided him through winding halls until they reached a garden that looked as if it had been shaped from starlight. Trees glowed faintly with blue veins, and flowers opened in silence as though listening to the breeze. There, waiting for him, was the princess. She stood tall, her hands folded before her, her expression calm but unreadable. Her violet eyes caught the morning light in a way that made them seem endless. Daniel felt awkward as he approached. He wanted to say something formal, something that would match the strangeness of this situation, but no words came. It was the princess who finally broke the silence. "You look uneasy, human." Daniel gave a half smile. "You could say that. Yesterday your mother asked me to marry you. That's not something I hear every day." Her gaze did not soften. "It is not something I wished for either. But my mother is not wrong. Our people are dying, and she will do anything to stop it." Even this, Daniel studied her. She spoke with calmness, but behind it he sensed something else. Perhaps anger. Perhaps fear. "Do you believe it? That marrying me could save your people?" The princess turned her face toward the glowing trees. "I do not know. We are bound by traditions so old that we have forgotten why they began. Our blood has grown weak, our minds rigid. You humans are different. You adapt. You are reckless, yet you survive. That is why my mother believes you may carry the spark we lost. But belief is not proof." Daniel walked beside her, his boots crunching softly against the crystal-like path. "So you don't want this?" Her eyes returned to him, steady and sharp. "Wanting is not the same as needing. I did not grow up dreaming of marrying a human, Captain Reeve. But I also did not grow up dreaming that my people would fade away. You must understand. If I must sacrifice my freedom to protect them, I will." Daniel felt a weight settle on his chest. She was not simply a royal figure caught in a strange plan. She was a person carrying the survival of her entire race. He could see the quiet strength in her words, but also the loneliness in her eyes. They walked deeper into the garden. The air was filled with soft scents, strange but not unpleasant. He noticed how the flowers seemed to turn toward the princess as she passed, as if recognizing her. It reminded him of Earth in a strange way, of a world that responded to those who cared for it. After a long silence, Daniel said, "On Earth, marriage means choice. It's not just duty. 2 people decide together. Without that, it means nothing." The princess's expression shifted slightly, as though his words touched something she had hidden away. "Choice," she repeated softly, as if testing the word. "For us, duty always came first. That is why we have endured for so long. But perhaps that is also why we are now dying." Before Daniel could reply, voices rose from beyond the garden wall. Harsh, angry tones carried into the calm air. Daniel could not understand the alien words, but the princess's face hardened. Moments later, 3 Veyari nobles stepped into view. They were taller than most, their robes dark and edged with crimson. Their eyes burned with hostility as they looked at Daniel. One of them spoke sharply to the princess, his voice heavy with contempt. She answered back with calm strength, her words flowing like a blade of silk. Daniel could not follow their language, but he understood enough from their body language. They disapproved. They were furious that a human stood beside her. Finally, one of them turned to Daniel and spoke in broken human tongue. "You are not worthy. Leave our world before you bring shame." Daniel stood firm, though his heart raced. He wanted to answer, to fight back with words, but the princess raised her hand. Her voice rang sharp and clear. The nobles fell silent, glaring at her with open hatred before retreating into the shadows. When they were gone, Daniel looked at her. "Enemies?" "Opposition," she corrected, though her voice was cold. "There are many who will not accept this idea. They see you as an invader, not a savior. If you stay, you will face trials that no human has faced before." Daniel felt his jaw tighten. He had faced danger before, but this was different. This was not just survival. This was stepping into the heart of an alien empire, into their politics, their hopes, their future. He looked at the princess standing tall despite the weight on her shoulders. I didn't ask for this, he admitted. But if I walk away now, what happens to your people? Her violet eyes softened just a little. They will fade, slowly, silently, until only memories remain. Daniel exhaled, the weight of her words sinking into him. For the first time, he realized the choice was not only about him, it was about whether humanity would stand aside or step forward, even into the unknown. The next days in the Veyari Palace were a blur for Daniel. He attended meetings, feasts, and ceremonies, but everywhere he went, he felt the eyes of the nobles on him. Some watched with quiet curiosity, others with open dislike. He was a stranger in their ancient court, and every step reminded him that he did not belong. Yet the elder woman, the princess's mother, treated him with a respect that carried both hope and desperation. She believed in him even though he barely believed in himself. The Princess Serenia kept her distance at first. She was present at the gatherings, always poised, always graceful, but she rarely spoke to him. When she did, her words were measured, careful like someone who weighed every syllable. Daniel wondered if she saw him as nothing more than a duty, a tool for survival. But late one evening, when most of the court had retreated and the palace grew quiet, he found her alone in the library. The Veyari library was unlike anything he had seen before. Thousands of glowing crystals floated in the air, each containing knowledge, history, songs, and maps of stars long forgotten. Serenia stood in the center, her hand resting on one of the glowing shards. She turned when she heard his steps, her violet eyes catching the faint light. "You should not walk here without a guide," she said softly. Daniel shrugged. "I couldn't sleep. Thought I'd get lost in books instead of my thoughts." She studied him for a moment, then lowered her hand from the crystal. "You humans are strange. When our minds are troubled, we sit in silence until clarity returns, but you seek more noise, more questions." "Sometimes the answers come in the noise," Daniel replied. He looked at the floating crystals. "So this is your history?" Serenia nodded. "Every victory, every failure, every song we once sang. All preserved. But what use is memory when the future fades?" Her words carried sorrow, and Daniel felt a pull in his chest. He stepped closer. "Maybe the past shows you how to survive the future, or maybe it shows you what not to repeat." She tilted her head. "And what does your past show you, human?" Daniel thought of Earth, of wars, struggles, and mistakes. Of the countless times humanity had stumbled but risen again. "It shows me that survival isn't about strength or purity. It's about change. We're alive today because we never stopped adapting even when it hurt. Maybe that's the difference between us." For the first time, Serenia's expression softened. A small spark lit her eyes, faint but real. She whispered, "Change." The word seemed heavy on her tongue, as if she had never spoken it before with meaning. Before Daniel could answer, the sound of footsteps echoed through the library. A group of younger Veyari entered, dressed in plain robes. Their eyes widened when they saw him with the princess, but instead of hostility, there was something else. Curiosity, maybe even admiration. One of them, barely more than a youth, bowed his head. "Princess," he said, "we heard the human speaks differently. He sees the stars in ways we do not. Is it true?" Serenia looked at Daniel, then back at them. "It is true. He thinks as his people do, without fear of breaking tradition." The youths whispered among themselves, their voices hopeful. Daniel realized then that not all the Veyari were against him. Some saw him as a chance, just as the elder woman had. When the group left, Serenia turned to him again. "They look at you as if you are a flame in the dark. Do you understand what that means?" Daniel shook his head slowly. "I'm just a man, a soldier who turned into a diplomat. I'm no flame." "You are wrong," she said, her voice calm but firm. "Our people have lived so long that we fear even the thought of change. But you are change-walking. That frightens some and inspires others. That is why they will test you. They will push you until you break. And if you do not, perhaps they will finally believe." Daniel let out a quiet breath. "So this is more than just marriage. It's survival. It's politics. It's war without weapons." Serenia's eyes held his. "Yes, and if you choose to stay, you must be ready for trials you cannot imagine. The nobles will not accept you easily. Already they whisper of ways to drive you away. If you fall, my mother's dream falls with you." The weight of her words pressed on him, heavier than any battlefield armor. Yet instead of fear, Daniel felt something else stir within him. Resolve. He had been thrown into impossible missions before, and somehow humanity always found a way. Maybe this was no different. He straightened, meeting her gaze. Then let them test me. I won't back down. For a long moment, Serenia said nothing. Then, for the first time since he met her, a faint smile touched her lips. It was small, almost hidden, but it carried more meaning than any formal gesture. Perhaps, she said softly, you are not as lost as I thought. That night, as Daniel returned to his chamber, the whispers of the court grew louder. He could feel the storm gathering around him, but somewhere in that storm he also felt the beginning of trust. The days that followed felt heavier, as if the palace itself was holding its breath. Daniel began to notice the divide among the Veyari more clearly. In the feasting halls, some nobles greeted him with polite words, masking their doubt with thin smiles. Others did not bother to hide their disdain, turning their heads when he passed, their whispers sharp as blades. The younger ones often watched him with curious eyes, whispering about the strange human who spoke of change without fear. Serenia kept her distance in public, always carrying herself as the daughter of royalty should. But when the two of them were alone, their conversations grew longer. She asked about Earth, about human wars and triumphs, about the way his people always seemed to rise again after falling. Daniel told her stories of explorers who crossed oceans without knowing what waited on the other side, of inventors who failed 100 times before they succeeded once. She listened in silence, but her eyes often glimmered with thought, as though she were storing his words like treasures. Yet the opposition was growing stronger. One evening, during a formal council gathering, a noble dressed in black and silver robes rose from his seat. His tall frame and piercing eyes commanded attention. Daniel recognized him from the group that had confronted them in the garden. His voice cut through the chamber with sharp authority. Why should we let an outsider, a human, step into the bloodline of Veyari? He demanded. We have survived for ages without their kind. Shall we now abandon our pride and bind ourselves to weakness? Murmurs filled the hall, some in agreement, some in protest. The elder woman, Serenia's mother, lifted her hand to speak, but the noble pressed on. He pointed directly at Daniel. He has done nothing to prove his worth. He stands here with empty hands, no knowledge of our trials, no proof that his presence will save us. If he is to remain, let him be tested. Let him face the trial of worlds, as our ancestors once did. Only then can he claim a place beside the princess. The hall grew silent. Daniel could not understand every word, but he understood enough. A trial, a test, and judging from the looks on the faces around him, it was not something taken lightly. The elder woman's voice finally rose, strong, but calm. The trial has not been called for generations. It is dangerous, perhaps even deadly. The noble bowed his head slightly, but his eyes remained cold. If the human fails, then it will prove what many of us already know, that this path is folly. If he succeeds, then perhaps he is worthy. Let the stars themselves decide. All eyes turned to Daniel. He felt the weight of their stares pressing on him. He wanted to refuse, to say he was no pawn in their games. But then he looked at Serenia. Her face was calm, but her violet eyes betrayed a flicker of worry. And behind her stood her mother, her hands clasped tightly, waiting for his answer. Daniel straightened his shoulders. If this trial is what it takes for you to believe me, then I'll face it. The hall erupted into murmurs again, some voices filled with surprise, others with approval. The noble smiled thinly, as though he had expected this answer. That night, Serenia came to him. She found him on a balcony overlooking the endless alien city, its spires glowing faintly under the light of 2 moons. Her robe shimmered in the silver glow, and her expression was serious. You should not have agreed so quickly, she said. Daniel turned toward her, leaning against the rail. Would it have mattered if I refused? They'd see me as a coward. At least this way I have a chance. Her eyes narrowed. The trial of worlds is no simple test. It was designed to break even the strongest of our kind. Few have passed it. Many have died. He met her gaze without flinching. Then I'll just have to do what humans always do. Survive. For a moment her face softened, though worry still lingered. You speak with such certainty, but certainty can be a weapon or a weakness. Daniel gave a faint smile. Maybe. But I've learned something in my life. Sometimes you can't wait for certainty. Sometimes you just act and figure it out as you go. Serenia looked out at the moon, silent for a long time. Finally, she said, If you fall, my people will close their hearts forever. And if you succeed, you will carry a burden heavier than you know. He nodded slowly. I understand. But either way, I can't turn back now. The wind shifted, carrying with it the faint hum of the city below. For a brief moment, they stood side by side in silence. Two figures from different worlds bound together by fate. And though neither spoke it aloud, they both knew the coming days would decide not only their futures but the future of an entire people. The day of the trial came faster than Daniel expected. The palace buzzed with energy as if the entire city already knew what was about to happen. Banners of silver and violet hung across the wide avenues, and streams of citizens filled the streets, their glowing eyes fixed on the human who dared to step into an ancient test. Daniel walked through the palace gates under heavy guard, though he knew the guards were less for his protection and more to keep him from fleeing. The arena stood on the edge of the city, carved into the side of a mountain of crystal stone. Its walls rose high, curving like the ribs of a giant beast, and above them the sky glowed with two suns. The roar of the crowd echoed like thunder, though most voices spoke in the strange melodic tongue of the Veyari. Daniel could not understand their words, but he understood their meaning. They had come to watch him succeed, or more likely, to watch him fail. At the center of the arena, Serenia and her mother stood on a raised platform. The elder woman's face was solemn, her eyes fixed on him with quiet hope. Serenia's expression was calm, but Daniel thought he saw the faintest flicker of worry in her gaze. She had warned him of the dangers, and now he was about to face them. A voice boomed across the arena, carried by unseen speakers. It was the noble who had demanded this trial, his voice sharp and commanding. The trial of worlds begins. The human claims worthiness. Let him prove it. The ground beneath Daniel shifted. Sections of the arena floor slid open, revealing strange machines and shifting obstacles. Blades of crystal rose and spun. Walls moved to form a twisting labyrinth, and deep pits opened with glowing energy below. It was not a battle of strength alone, but a test of endurance, speed, and cunning. Daniel's heart raced, but he forced himself to breathe steady. He had been in worse places, trenches on Earth, battles in space. Fear had never saved him, but instinct often had. When the signal rang, he ran. The first challenge was a field of shifting tiles. They glowed and cracked beneath his feet, dropping away into nothing if he stayed too long. Daniel moved quickly, trusting his instincts, jumping from one tile to the next. Twice he nearly slipped, catching himself at the last second, and the crowd gasped in unison. He gritted his teeth, forcing himself forward until he reached the other side. The second challenge came without warning. From the walls burst mechanical beasts shaped like hunting animals, their bodies sleek with silver armor and glowing with blue light. They charged, moving faster than he expected. Daniel dove aside, rolling across the ground. He had no weapons, only his fists and whatever he could find. His eyes caught a broken shard of crystal from the tiles behind him. He snatched it up, gripping it like a blade. One of the machines lunged. Daniel sidestepped and drove the shard into its neck joint. Sparks burst and the beast collapsed, twitching. The crowd roared louder, half in shock, half in anger. The other machines circled, but Daniel kept moving, never standing still long enough for them to strike. One by one, he used his wits and speed to bring them down. By the time the last fell, his arms ached. His breath came in ragged gasps and sweat ran down his face. But he was alive. The third and final challenge rose from the ground, a towering wall of crystal nearly 20 meters high. Its surface was smooth, sharp-edged, and nearly impossible to climb. Daniel stared at it, his chest heaving. The crowd had grown silent now, waiting to see if he would break. He touched the wall, feeling its cool surface. There were no ladders, no ropes, no obvious way. But Daniel remembered his words to Serenia, that humans survive by adapting. He studied the edges, noticing tiny cracks where the shifting machinery had joined. He pressed his fingers into them, testing their strength. It would cut his hands raw, but it was possible. Slowly, painfully, he began to climb. Every pull sent fire through his muscles. Blood streaked his palms where the sharp edges cut him, but he did not stop. The wall seemed endless, and more than once he nearly slipped. Each time he forced himself to think not of the drop below, but of the next handhold above. When at last he pulled himself over the edge, the arena erupted. Some cheered, some shouted in anger, but no one remained silent. Daniel stood at the top, his chest burning, his hands bleeding, but his spirit unbroken. He had done what few Veyari had ever done, and he had done it as a human, without their strength, without their traditions, only with his will to endure. Serenia's eyes widened as she looked at him from the platform. For the first time, she let her calm mask slip. There was something like pride in her gaze, faint but unmistakable. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, shining in the light of the sun's. The noble who had demanded the trial rose again, his face pale with anger. "Luck," he spat, though his voice shook. Nothing more. But Daniel knew, and so did the people, that it was not luck. It was the stubborn, relentless will of humanity, the will to keep going when everything else tried to stop them. As Daniel stood bleeding but unbroken, he realized something. This was no longer just a test. This was the beginning of a war of belief, a struggle to prove that humanity had a place among the stars. The arena had quieted, but the tension remained. Daniel had passed the trial of worlds, but the victory was not his alone. The crowd's eyes were on him, some filled with awe, some with hatred. He stepped down from the wall of crystal, his hands cut and bleeding, his clothes torn, but his spirit unbroken. Serenia met him at the edge, her violet eyes shining with something he could not yet name. Her mother stood beside her, relief and hope mingled on her face. Before words could be exchanged, chaos erupted. The noble who had challenged Daniel earlier did not disappear quietly. He had gathered allies during the trial, plotting in shadows. Now as the crowd watched, he signaled, and guards and mercenaries cloaked in dark armor surged toward the platforms. Their intention was clear: strike Daniel and Serenia and end the human threat once and for all. Daniel's instincts kicked in. He pushed Serenia behind him and scanned the area. The palace had not prepared him for open battle, but the arena itself offered tools. Jagged shards of crystal left from the trial's obstacles littered the floor. Daniel grabbed one, wielding it like a blade. Serenia, though unarmed, stood beside him, her eyes wide but steady. She raised her hand and faint energy pulsed from her fingers. Daniel realized she could defend herself in ways humans could not. The first wave of attackers charged. Daniel sidestepped and slashed, his shard cutting through the armored limbs of the closest. Sparks flew and a few fell back. Surprised by the human speed and precision, he moved with instinct, pushing himself harder, remembering every story of human survival he had ever known. The attackers were strong, but they underestimated his cunning. Serenia's energy blasts began to scatter the enemies. She had been trained in palace defense, but Daniel noticed that she fought with something more than technique. She fought with determination, with hope, with the need to protect the future she now believed in. Together, they were a strange but effective team. Daniel would strike. She would defend. Daniel would create an opening. She would push the attackers back. The noble who had plotted this watched from a distance, his face twisted with fury. "Stop him," he barked, but his words were empty. The human was not just surviving, he was adapting. Every move the noble predicted had already been countered. Daniel ducked under a sweeping energy blade and kicked a shard into the nearest attacker, sending him sprawling. He grabbed Serenia's arm. "We need to get to higher ground," he shouted. The arena's platforms offered elevation, a chance to control the flow of attackers. Serenia nodded and summoned another pulse of energy to scatter the closest wave. Together, they leapt onto the nearest platform, gaining the advantage. From above, Daniel could see the crowd. Many had fled, but some were still watching. Among them, he noticed the younger Veyari, the ones who had whispered about hope days before. Their eyes widened, admiration and disbelief mingling as they watched a human fight with courage and strategy, not strength alone. Daniel realized then that this was more than survival. It was inspiration. The final attacker surged forward, the noble himself stepping into the fray. Daniel met him head-on. The noble was larger, more experienced in combat, but Daniel had learned from the trial. He dodged, countered, and used the crystal shards as leverage. Every strike he made was precise. Every move was human ingenuity in motion. He could see it in Serenia's eyes, the recognition that humans were not weak, that survival came in forms the Veyari had forgotten. With one final push, Daniel sent the noble staggering back, disarmed and defeated. The remaining attackers either fled or surrendered, unable to overcome the unexpected unity of human courage and Veyari skill. Silence fell across the arena, broken only by Daniel's labored breathing and the soft hum of the palace. Serenia approached him, her hands steady now, her expression a mix of awe and relief. "You survived," she whispered. Daniel smiled faintly, wiping blood from his hands. "We survived. Not me alone." Her mother stepped forward, tears in her eyes. You have done what I feared was impossible, she said. You have not only proven your worth, but you have given my people hope. Daniel looked around the arena. The nobles who had opposed him were quiet, their expressions unreadable. Some bowed slightly, recognizing strength in a form they had not expected. Others retreated, unwilling to challenge what they could not understand. For the first time, Daniel felt a sense of belonging, not because the Veyari had accepted him completely, but because he had faced impossible odds and endured. Humanity had once again shown its resilience, and it had changed the hearts of an entire alien species. As the suns began to set over the glowing city, Daniel and Serenia stood side by side, battered but unbroken. They knew the challenges ahead were far from over, but for now, they had survived the impossible together. And in that survival, a new beginning had quietly taken root. The city of Veyari was quiet that evening, the chaos of the trial and battle fading into memory. Daniel stood on the balcony of the royal palace, overlooking the sprawling crystal spires that glimmered under the twin moons. Beside him, Serenia's presence was calm, yet he could feel the strength in her stance. They had survived trials that no one expected them to, and now the weight of the future rested lightly on their shoulders, ready to grow heavier with each passing day. Serenia spoke first, her voice soft. The council has met. They are divided, but they have agreed to consider your place in our world. You have proven yourself human. That is clear. Daniel nodded, staring out at the city below. I didn't come here to rule or to claim power. I only wanted to help. If my survival inspires hope, then that is enough. The princess turned to him, her violet eyes reflecting the moons above. Hope is powerful. My people have lived for centuries, holding on to pride and tradition. That pride has kept us alive, but it has also held us back. You have shown us something we forgot, that change is not weakness and courage is not limited to our kind. He smiled faintly. Humans survive by pushing forward, even when we don't know what will happen next. Maybe that's what you needed, to see it in action, not just hear it in words. Serenia looked out over the city, then back at him. And now? What will happen next? Daniel considered her question carefully. He had no authority here beyond what respect and courage had earned him, but he knew that even a single human's presence could alter the course of a civilization. We rebuild, he said simply. Together. Humans vary, whatever it takes. Your people have the tools and you have the wisdom. I can offer perspective, ideas, and a willingness to fight when necessary, but it is your choice to step forward into the future. The elder woman joined them, her glowing hands folded in front of her. She had aged beyond the years of memory, but her eyes sparkled brighter than ever. You have given us a chance, she said. Not through magic or bloodlines, but through will and courage. That is a gift greater than any technology, greater than any history we have preserved. You are human, and that is why we survived this day. Daniel looked at her, feeling the weight of her words. He had faced impossible challenges, not with advanced weapons or alien powers, but with human ingenuity, adaptability, and determination. It was a lesson he had always known, but seeing it reflected in the eyes of an entire species made it real in a way he had never imagined. Serenia stepped closer, her hand brushing lightly against his. You could have walked away. You could have ignored us, returned to your own kind. But you stayed. You risked yourself, and in doing so you risked something far greater, the stability of your own people's reputation among the stars. Daniel shook his head slightly. I didn't think of it like that. I only thought of what needed to be done. I had to survive, not just for me, but for those who believed that survival was still possible. That includes you and your people. For a long moment they stood in silence. The wind moved across the balcony, soft and cool, carrying the faint hum of the city below. Daniel realized that in surviving the trial, he had changed something fundamental, not just the Veyari, but himself. He had learned that courage was not only about facing danger, it was about stepping into the unknown when failure could mean more than death. Finally, Serenia spoke, a note of determination in her voice.
We have work to do.
The council must be convinced fully. Our people must be guided, and the threats that linger in the shadows must be addressed. Are you ready, human? Daniel looked out at the city, its lights like stars mirrored on the ground, and nodded. I'm ready. Let's build something better together. The elder woman smiled, placing a hand gently on Serenya's shoulder. The future begins now with those who dare to act. You have proven that humanity is more than a species. It is a force, a hope, a spark, and with you perhaps we will endure after all. As the moons rose higher, casting silver light across the palace and city, Daniel felt a quiet sense of purpose settle over him. The trials were over, but the journey had only begun. Together, he and Serenya would guide the Veyari into a future neither species could have imagined alone. For the first time since he had arrived, Daniel allowed himself a small smile. Humanity had been tested, and though they were far from perfect, they had endured. They had inspired another species to believe, to change, and to fight for their survival. That, he realized, was the true meaning of being human. And in that quiet moment, under twin moons and a sky of endless stars, the human and the alien princess stood side by side, ready to face the galaxy together. A new chapter had begun, not through power alone, but through courage, hope, and the simple, undeniable force of humanity.